I never thought the end of my father's life would feel like the beginning of my own unraveling. The room smelled of old books and polished wood. The lawyer's office, the same one where Dad had taken us as little girls to sign our first savings accounts. Sunlight slanted through half-closed blinds, cutting sharp lines across the mahogany table. I sat there in the black dress I'd worn to every hospital visit for the last 3 years. My hands folded so tightly my knuckles ached. Sarah sat across from me, legs crossed, red lipstick perfectly in place. She always looked like she'd just stepped off a yacht. Even when our father was fading away in a hospital bed, she hadn't been there for the sleepless nights, the medications, the quiet moments when Dad would squeeze my hand and whisper, "You're my rock, Em." But she was here now. Of course she was. Dad's voice still echoed in my memory from just days earlier. Weak but certain. "I've taken care of everything, girls. The house. It goes to family. Real family." When Mr. Hargrove, the lawyer, slid the keys across the table toward Sarah, her lips curved into that familiar smirk, the one she used to give me when she'd stolen my prom dress or convinced. Dad, her report card was better than mine. She reached out, manicured fingers closing around the brass keyring like she'd won a prize. "I always knew he loved me most," she said softly, almost to herself, but loud enough for me to hear. My chest tightened. I looked down at my lap so she wouldn't see the tears burning my eyes. After everything, after I'd given up my career, my relationship, my savings to care for him, this was how it ended? The family home where I'd cooked his meals, read to him when he couldn't sleep, held his hand when the pain became unbearable, handed over with a smirk. But what I didn't know that day was that Dad had saved his final words for the very last envelope. Mr. Hargrove cleared his throat. "There's one more document." Mr. Thompson insisted it only be opened in the presence of both daughters. He broke the seal. The lawyer began reading, and the room grew so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. "To my daughters, Emily and Sarah, I have watched. I have listened. And I have known." Sarah's smirk faltered for half a second. Dad's letter continued in Mr. Hargrove's steady voice. He spoke of the nights Sarah had called him asking for money while pretending to visit. The forged signatures on documents she'd used to drain his retirement accounts. The way she'd told him I was exaggerating his illness so I could keep him isolated and control his money. Every word landed like a blade. I stared at my sister, the woman I had once carried on my back through the backyard when she was 6 and scared of the dark. The woman who had laughed when I told her I was putting my life on hold for Dad. The woman who now sat there, face slowly draining of color. You told him I was stealing?" I whispered. Sarah's eyes flashed. "He was confused, Emily. Old, you know how he got." But the letter kept going. Dad had hired a private investigator months ago. Bank records, phone transcripts, even recordings of Sarah on the phone, bragging to her boyfriend that once the old man was gone, she'd sell the house and finally be free of this dysfunctional family. My hands started shaking. All those times she'd shown up with expensive gifts and empty promises, they were just theater. While I was changing Dad's oxygen tank and wiping his tears, she was calculating how soon she could cash in. Mr. Hargrove paused, then read the final paragraph. "The house and the majority of my estate will not go to the one who smiles the brightest, but to the one who stayed. Sarah, you have already received more than your share in secret. Emily, my girl, the keys were never hers. They were only a test. The real title is in the attached trust. And if Sarah contests this, every piece of evidence goes public." Sarah shot up from her chair. "This is ridiculous. He wasn't in his right mind." But I wasn't listening anymore. Something inside me, something gentle and trusting, shattered completely. The sister I had defended, the one I had made excuses for my whole life, had been waiting for Dad to die like it was a business transaction. I stood slowly. My voice was quiet, but it didn't tremble. "You smirked when he handed you those keys. You actually smirked." She tried to speak, but I raised my hand. For the first time in my life, I didn't shrink. "You broke us, Sarah, not just me. You broke what was left of our family." She stormed out, keys still clutched in her hand, keys that meant nothing. That night I sat alone in Dad's house, the one that was truly mine, surrounded by his books and his old records. The pain was so deep I could barely breathe. I cried until there were no tears left. But underneath the sorrow, something else was stirring. a quiet, burning resolve. I didn't scream. I didn't chase her. I simply did what Dad had asked. The evidence went to the family lawyer, and then quietly to the authorities handling the financial fraud claims Sarah had tried to bury. She had been siphoning money for years, not just from Dad, but from a small charity fund he'd supported, the kind of thing that made headlines when it came out. At first, she fought. She called me crying, promising she'd change, saying she was sorry. But her voice had the same practiced tone I'd heard her use on Dad. I simply said, "The house isn't yours, Sarah, and neither is my forgiveness." Then I hung up. Weeks later, I stood at the window of the house filled with memories of Dad's gentle laughter and my own quiet sacrifices, and watched the moving truck pull away from Sarah's luxury apartment across town. The fraud case had frozen her accounts. Friends who once adored her, glamorous life suddenly remembered they had always suspected something. She called one last time, voice small and broken. "They're taking everything, Em. Please, we're sisters." I closed my eyes, remembering the little girl I once loved. We were, until you chose money over blood. I didn't help her. For the first time, I chose myself. Months passed. I restored the garden Dad loved. I turned his study into a reading nook where I could finally write again, the dream I'd put on hold for years. And slowly, the shattered pieces inside me began to mend. Not into the same shape, but into something stronger. Sarah's smirk is gone now. Last I heard, she's living in a small rental, working a job she once would have laughed at. She never got the keys. She never got the satisfaction of destroying what I had built with love. And me? I finally understand what Dad was trying to teach us both. Family isn't the person who smiles the prettiest or talks the loudest. It's the one who stays when it's hard, the one who chooses loyalty over convenience. I keep the final envelope in Dad's desk. Sometimes I open it just to read his last line to me. "You were never second, Emily. You were always first in my heart." The house is quiet now, but it's filled with peace. And every night, when I lock the front door with the keys that were always meant to be mine, I whisper the same thing. "Thank you, Dad. I finally found my way home." If there's one thing I've learned through all this pain and betrayal, it's this. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying someone else. It's quietly becoming the woman you were always meant to be, while the people who tried to break you watch from the outside, locked out of the life they thought they could steal. And that is enough.